Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Path Beyond the Whispering Oaks. Ilora Whitmore adjusted the strap of her canvas satchel and stepped off the gravel road, her boots crunching softly against a trail that disappeared beneath a canopy of whispering oaks. The town behind her had long vanished into the misty morning, and ahead, the forest opened its arms like an old friend welcoming her back. This was not a random stroll, it was a pilgrimage of instinct, a walk driven by a feeling that had haunted her dreams for years. The path, narrow and overgrown, curved with a memory of its own. Birds chirped in layered harmonies above, and the air held the scent of moss, distant rain, and something older, something like parchment left in a forgotten drawer. Every step forward was like leafing through a long-lost storybook she hadn't realized she'd read before. Ilora had spent years drifting from city to city, renting spaces that never quite felt like home. She'd lived in bustling metropolises, coastal towns, high-rise apartments, and countryside cottages. None had whispered to her soul the way her dreams had promised. In those dreams, a certain house waited wooden, nestled in green, lit by the hush of afternoon sun through linen curtains. The house never showed its door, yet it called to her with a quiet certainty. And now, here she was. The trail sloped gently upward. Ferns brushed her legs, and a butterfly danced past her shoulder before disappearing into the undergrowth. A gentle breeze carried the rustle of the trees like a lullaby. Ilora didn't rush. This moment felt sacred, as though the universe had choreographed it millennia ago. Then, just as she turned around a final bend, the forest parted. There it was. The house stood quietly at the end of a stone path half covered by ivy. 2 stories tall, built with faded timber and crowned with a mossy roof, it nestled into the landscape as though it had grown there. Vines curled lovingly along its stone base. Its windows, tall, arched, gleamed in the light, reflecting not her, but the world it had watched over for who knew how long. Ilora felt her breath catch. The silence wasn't empty. It pulsed. Alive. She stepped off the trail and onto the stone path, heart fluttering with something that was neither fear nor excitement, but something in between, a memory trying to return. She ran her fingers over the twisted iron gate, pushed it gently. It gave way with a low groan, like a sigh. Each step toward the house felt heavier, as though the ground itself wanted her to walk slower, to feel every moment. The front porch creaked as she stepped on it. The door, though aged and carved with curling patterns like branches or flame, was strong. Her fingers hovered above the doorknob. A crow cawed in the distance. She turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The door opened inward with a softness that startled her. Inside, the house was still. Dust motes swam in golden beams. The scent of lavender and old paper filled the air. The entryway opened into a wide room where aged floorboards stretched toward a fireplace made of stone. Bookshelves lined one wall, half filled. A coat hung by the door, despite no one being there. A kettle sat on a counter in the next room, just slightly askew as though someone had made tea and left mid-thought. Illyra stepped inside and let the door close behind her. This wasn't just a house. It was a pause in time. A heartbeat preserved. A story waiting for its next chapter. She didn't speak. She didn't even fully understand what was happening. But in her soul, a voice whispered, "You're home." And for the first time in her wandering life, Illyra didn't question it. She walked further in, her fingers trailing across the dusty surface of a side table, her eyes catching a cracked photograph frame, a shadowy mirror. Everything in this place seemed to know her, though they had never met. She wasn't sure if she had arrived at this place or returned. Outside, the breeze picked up, and the oaks swayed. And so began her story, not with a bang or a call, but with a silent house, a creaking floor, and the ancient hush of the forest welcoming her back. The floor creaked beneath Illyra's steps as she wandered deeper into the heart of the house. The silence wasn't empty, it hummed, subtle but constant, like the low breath of a slumbering presence. Dust lay gently over everything, yet it wasn't neglect she felt, it was reverence, like a museum left untouched for reasons sacred and unspoken. She moved slowly, half afraid that her presence would disturb something delicate and irretrievable. Each room she entered unfolded like a page from a journal she hadn't realized belonged to her. And in that quiet unraveling, the house began to tell its story. To her left, a sitting room opened up beneath a high-beamed ceiling. Faded tapestries hung from the walls, their threads bleached by sunlight and time. A grand window overlooked the back garden, and in the center of the room stood a circular table carved from walnut wood, the surface etched with symbols she couldn't quite decipher, like a compass that pointed inward instead of out. On the table, beneath a fine layer of dust, lay an old, folded piece of parchment. Illyra hesitated, then unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map, not of the region, not of roads or landmarks she recognized, but of something stranger, more abstract. The layout of the house itself sprawled across the page, sketched in sharp ink strokes. Each room had a name, handwritten with a care that felt deeply personal: the lantern hall, the garden of longing, the threshold of stillness. Not just names, but identities. The map hinted at layers of the house that couldn't be seen from outside. Beneath the blueprint, in tiny looping script, were the words, "A house remembers those who dream." Illyra's fingers tightened around the parchment. Her heart was thudding now, louder than before. She folded the map and tucked it into her satchel. Was this a game someone had left behind? A scavenger hunt? Or was it something more? She thought of her dream again. The house in it had never revealed a door, and yet this one had opened effortlessly. Perhaps dreams only hide things until we're ready. She stepped into the hallway beyond the sitting room, where the floor sloped slightly downward. The walls here were narrower, the ceilings lower, and everything was lit by the dim glow of hanging lanterns, strangely, some still flickering, as if recently lit. At the end of the hall, she found a door that was slightly ajar. Inside, the kitchen. It was rustic, with wooden cabinets and a hearth that looked as though it had once cooked meals for generations. Copper pans hung on hooks. A small window was set into the far wall, looking out over a sunlit patch of garden. A breeze wafted in, carrying the smell of earth and rosemary. On the counter lay a notebook. She opened it. Inside were pages of recipes, each entry written in the same delicate handwriting as the map. Some were familiar, others fantastical: lavender honey cake, moonlight stew, elderflower cider of remembrance. A note was tucked between the pages. She unfolded it and read, "For the one who finds this place, know that it's never truly lost. The house is patient, but it never forgets." Ilora blinked slowly. She sat down at the kitchen table, her hand trembling slightly as she set the note aside. The warmth of the place had seeped into her skin now, not just from the sun, but from something deeper. This was more than a home. It was a vessel. A keeper of echoes. And maybe, just maybe, it had been waiting for her. She pulled the map back out, studying its lines. There were rooms she hadn't yet seen. Places with names that stirred something in her chest. One room, near the center of the diagram, was circled in red ink. It read, "The Hearth of Memory." She didn't know what she would find there. But she was beginning to understand something vital: this house wasn't here to be owned. It was here to be remembered. She rose from the chair, parchment in hand, and made her way back into the hall, the lantern light trembling in her wake. Ilora pressed the folded map against her chest for a moment before tucking it into her coat pocket. The hallway before her curved left into what the diagram had labeled the Garden of Longing. A strange name, she thought, but by now, she had accepted that this house didn't follow the ordinary rules of architecture, time, or even memory. Each corner felt like a sentence in a chapter only half written. She turned the corner and found herself before a pair of wide wooden doors with tall, narrow glass panels. Sunlight poured through the frosted glass, fractured like cathedral light. The wood was carved with delicate ivy patterns, nearly invisible except when the light hit just right. She reached out and pushed. The doors creaked open, and the scent hit her immediately: earth, rain, jasmine, and something deeper, almost sorrowful, like the way old letters smell when first opened after years in a box. The garden was not large, but it was layered in an intentional chaos of beauty. Lavender shrubs flanked a cobblestone path that twisted through beds of overgrown wildflowers, climbing roses, and tall stalks of foxglove. A single birch tree rose near the center, its pale bark catching the afternoon sun like polished silver. There were stone benches half swallowed by moss, and birdhouses swaying gently in the breeze. It was a place untouched by any gardener's recent hand, but not abandoned. No. This garden had simply grown into its own memory. Every petal, every weed, Every rusted trellis seemed to hold the ghost of a hand that once cared for it. Illyra stepped barefoot onto the cool cobblestones, the soft green breath of the place wrapping around her like silk. The wind stirred through the leaves, and she could almost hear a voice, soft, maternal, whispering her name not in sound but in sensation. She approached the birch tree and noticed something strange near its roots, a small stone plaque, barely visible beneath a curtain of ivy. She knelt, gently brushing it clean. It read, "For those who remember not just what was, but what could have been." Illyra's throat tightened. It wasn't grief she felt, it was yearning. A bittersweet pull from somewhere deep in her ribs, as though the garden was offering her a glimpse of unlived lives. She stood and looked around with new eyes. To the left, a rusted wrought iron gate leaned half open, separating the garden from a smaller, more enclosed alcove beyond. She stepped through. Here, the wildness of the garden gave way to a ring of carefully placed stones encircling a dry fountain. The basin was shallow, carved with images of stars and moon phases, though time had worn them down to suggestions rather than lines. In the center of the fountain lay an object. A locket. Illyra picked it up carefully. It was heavier than expected, cold and tarnished with age. She brushed her thumb across its surface and the clasp sprang open with a quiet click. Inside, instead of a photograph or a name, there was only a pressed flower and iris, perfectly preserved, and a folded piece of paper, so thin it threatened to crumble in her hands. She unfolded it with breath held still. It was a letter. Asterisk to the wanderer. If you've come this far, then you know the garden's secret. Not everything we long for is lost. Some things wait. For the right hands. For the right heart. Let the house show you what you've forgotten to remember. Asterisk. Illyra's hand trembled as she refolded the letter and placed it back into the locket. She fastened a chain around her neck, the cool metal brushing her collarbone like a promise. Somehow, the garden knew her. Not in the way of memory, but in the way of possibility. It knew what she had given up. What she still carried in silence. She remained in the alcove until the sun began to fall, watching as shadows lengthened and the wildflowers turned their petals toward the west. The air thickened with dusk, and for the first time in years, Illyra let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the release of something she hadn't realized she'd been holding for too long. As twilight bled into the sky, she made her way back through the garden path, past the birch, past the plaque, through the tall doors into the quiet house. The warmth met her like an embrace. The floorboards groaned slightly beneath her weight, but they felt less like protest now and more like welcome. Illyra turned to close the garden doors and paused for a moment, her eyes catching one last flicker of movement. A hummingbird. It hovered by the window, wings humming a silent song, then vanished into the trees. She smiled. There were places in this world that didn't just shelter you. They knew you. She was beginning to believe this house was one of them. And something told her it had only just begun to reveal itself. Night fell like a velvet curtain over the house, and the wind beyond the trees softened into a whisper. Illyra stood in the foyer, the scent of the garden still clinging faintly to her hair, her mind still tangled in the emotions the hidden alcove had stirred. The locket around her neck was warm now, not from the sun, but from something quieter and internal, like the heat that lingers after a remembered embrace. She turned back toward the map. Retrieving it from her coat, she spread it on the wide wooden table in the sitting room. Lantern light flickered above her, though she hadn't lit anything since her return indoors. And yet, the chandelier of aged iron and glass now glowed with a gentle flame in each sconce, as if the house had decided she should not be left in darkness. Her fingers traced the inked floor plan. The room she now stood in was labeled clearly, the room of arrival. A fitting name. Beyond it, the next space on the map curved sharply to the right. The Lantern Hall. She stared at the words, an inexplicable shiver running through her spine. It sounded ceremonial, more than a hallway, less than a sanctuary. She folded the map, tucked it beneath her arm, and moved to explore. The entrance to the Lantern Hall lay beyond a narrow archway framed by carved panels of olive wood. The detail in the carvings was extraordinary: depictions of trees bending toward light, animals pausing mid-step, their heads tilted upward, as though listening for a sound not heard in centuries. Illyra stepped beneath the arch and into a hallway lined with lanterns hanging from the walls at eye level. Each lantern was distinct. One held golden glass etched with swirling clouds. Another shimmered blue like deep ocean currents. Yet another flickered with the color of autumn leaves. And all of them were already lit. Not a single match had been struck. Illyra paused, heart thumping. She wasn't frightened. But she was reverent. As though she were walking through the living bloodstream of the house itself. The floor beneath her feet changed subtly as she moved. From creaking pine to smooth stone. Her boots whispered across the cool surface, and the lanterns pulsed faintly as she passed, each one dimming behind her, brightening ahead as if guiding her. At the far end of the hall stood a single door. Unlike the others in the house, this one was carved not of wood but of some composite stone and bone, perhaps, though softened with age. A symbol was embedded into the center, a spiral wrapped in ivy. She hesitated, then pressed her palm against it. The door opened without a sound. The room beyond took her breath. It was a circular chamber, tall like a tower, though there had been no hint of such a structure from outside. The walls curved upward into a dome, and along them stretched hundreds, maybe thousands of lanterns. They lined the walls in spirals, their light creating a vortex of warm gold, shifting shadows, and endless possibility. But the room was not empty. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a journal bound in cracked leather. Its surface bore no title, no markings, only the wear of many hands. Illyra approached it with cautious steps. Her fingers hovered above the cover, then pressed it open. Blank pages greeted her. At first. But as she turned through the book, words began to form. Not printed. Not inked. Emerging. She watched, breath shallow, as letters bled into the parchment like ink pulled from memory. You are not the first to seek this house, nor the first it has chosen. Every lantern here is a dream once dreamt, a memory once cherished, a life once lived. When the light of one's longing is strong enough, the house hears. Illyra's hands trembled. She turned another page. Asterisk, you have entered the Hall of Lanterns, where the house remembers those who dared to dream. If you wish to know more, you must light a lantern of your own. Asterisk. She looked up. A section of the wall, once dark, now pulsed with a soft blue glow. A lantern hung there unlit, empty, as if waiting for her. She walked slowly toward it. The moment she came near, her breath caught within the glass, a tiny wisp of light flickered and then vanished. It looked like a memory, or perhaps a thought she hadn't yet fully thought. There was no flint, no switch. But as she placed her palm on the lantern's iron base, warmth surged through her. Not a burning flame but a recognition. The lantern ignited. Not like the others. Hers burned a soft lavender hue, tinged with silver. And as it glowed, she felt something lift from her, a quiet sadness she hadn't admitted she'd carried. A wish she'd kept hidden, even from herself. The lantern accepted it, cradled it, preserved it. Behind her, the journal's pages fluttered, responding to the change. Illyra returned to the pedestal, and saw new words scrawled across the parchment. Asterisk, a piece of you lives here now. You are no longer a visitor. You are part of the light. Asterisk. She stood there for what felt like hours, watching her lantern glow in harmony with the thousands around it. Each light a soul, each flicker a story. And for the first time in her life, Illyra understood that belonging was not a place you found. It was a place that found you. Illyra descended the spiral stairs that wound down from the lantern hall, her footsteps light but her thoughts dense and tangled. The glow of her lantern still shimmered faintly behind her eyes, as though the light had embedded itself into her memory. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that something within her had been seen, not just acknowledged, but fully understood for the first time in years. The stairwell led her back toward the house's main floor, but she no longer felt like she was in the same place. It was as though the house had subtly reshaped itself around her, aligning its bones with her breath. A quiet companionship now threaded through every creaking floorboard and whispering draft. The map in her hand trembled slightly from the lantern's lingering warmth. Her fingers traced the line from the lantern hall to the next marked destination, the hearth of memory. The title gave her pause. She had assumed it referred to a simple fireplace. A cozy nook, maybe, where someone once read books beside a crackling flame. But now, after everything she had experienced, Illyra no longer trusted simplicity. When she reached the threshold, the temperature changed. A soft heat touched her cheeks like sunlight, even though the windows were shuttered. The hallway opened into a wide, oval-shaped room filled with warm, golden light like dawn trapped in amber. There were no harsh shadows, only a glowing gentleness that made everything feel suspended in time. At the far end of the room stood a grand stone hearth, massive, ancient, and strangely organic. Its surface bore carvings that rippled like waves, as though fire itself had once danced across the stone, leaving behind its imprint. Above the mantel hung a mirror, but not one made of glass. It appeared to be water, suspended upright, its surface undisturbed and shimmering. A fire crackled inside the hearth, but no smoke rose. No logs fed the flame. And yet it burned with deep orange light and a low, steady rhythm like a heart beating slowly in the chest of the house. As Illyra stepped closer, the room shifted. The air thickened. Time folded. And suddenly she was not alone. She blinked. She was still in the hearth room. But it had changed. The light now flickered like candlelight on a winter night. The long table in the center of the room was set for a meal. Plates and cutlery gleamed. Steam rose from bowls she couldn't quite see clearly. And around the table sat silhouettes. They were blurred at the edges like reflections on rippling water, but unmistakably human. A man laughed. A woman passed a dish. A child giggled and reached across the table. Their faces were indistinct, but their emotions were vivid. She felt them. Joy. Safety. Warm. Home. A scene playing not for her but from her. She stepped back, breath caught in her throat, and the vision vanished. The fire flickered. The table was empty. The mirror above the hearth shimmered again, but now it reflected something else, not the room, but her. Or a version of her. Illyra walked closer. In the mirror, she was seated beside the hearth, wrapped in a wool blanket, hair loose, a journal in her lap. She looked older, not in age but in peace, like someone who had stayed, settled, healed. The reflection met her gaze. And for a single second, the eyes in the mirror smiled. Then the image faded. In its place, words bloomed across the watery surface. What you remember becomes part of this place. And what this place remembers becomes part of you. Illyra swallowed hard. She turned toward the hearth and sat before it, cross-legged like a child at story time. The heat was gentle, wrapping around her like arms. For several long minutes, she simply breathed, listened. Let her thoughts surface. They came as memories. Her father reading to her on stormy nights. Her mother humming in the kitchen. The feeling of her first key turning in her first apartment door. The moment she realized she didn't want to be anywhere she'd been. The long ache of wanting a home and never quite finding it. And now, this room, this fire, this truth. She pulled the journal from her satchel and opened it to a blank page. The words spilled out before she could stop them. She wrote of the lantern hall, of the map, of the garden, of the locket and the dream it carried. She wrote of the way the fire seemed to listen, the way the house wrapped around her thoughts. When she looked back up, the flames danced higher, pulsing with soft intensity. The house had heard. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. But Illyra knew. She was becoming part of it now, not just in presence, but in story. And in this place, stories were never forgotten. She stood slowly, brushing ash from her palms, and turned one last time to the mirror. This time, there was no reflection. Only a single sentence, etched in light. Asterisk, the past is not behind you here. It walks beside you. Asterisk. The moment Illyra stepped through the heavy oak door marked the room of echoed voices. She felt the temperature drop, the air thickening with unspoken words. The faint hum of murmurs seemed to seep from the very walls, whispers that hover just beyond clear hearing, like voices caught in a distant wind or memories murmured from deep shadows. The room itself was long and narrow, with high vaulted ceilings that stretched upward, vanishing into darkness. Along the walls hung countless faded portraits, their subjects blurred and softened by time, eyes seeming to follow her every step. The light was dim, filtered through stained glass windows that cast fractured colors across the worn wooden floor. Illyra's footsteps echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the dense quiet. She could almost hear breaths, soft and steady, mingling with the faint rustling of unseen pages turning. This was a room built to remember, to hold. In the far corner rested a curious artifact, an antique phonograph, its brass horn glinting faintly in the muted light. Near it, a stack of fragile, yellowed records sat arranged in loose piles, each etched with delicate handwriting, names, dates, places long forgotten. Curiosity urged her forward. Illyra reached out and lifted the top record, sliding it gently onto the turntable. The needle settled, and from the horn came a crackle, then a soft voice. "Welcome, traveler. Your story is now part of ours." The voice was ethereal, layered with echoes as if hundreds spoke as one. It wasn't one person, but many, a chorus of stories entwined through time. The phonograph spun slowly, the music playing as a symphony of whispers, laughter, tears, and memories filled the room. Illyra closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the sound. The voices rose and fell, telling tales of those who had once walked these halls, who had sought solace, refuge, or belonging in this house. A woman's soft laugh floated past, recalling a spring morning when the garden bloomed with wild flowers. A child's excited chatter spoke of secret adventures beneath the birch tree. An old man's hushed tone whispered regrets and unspoken farewells. The room seemed to breathe with these layered voices, creating a tapestry of lives woven into the very fabric of the house. When the record finished, silence settled once more, profound and comforting. Illyra felt tears gather unbidden. These weren't just echoes of strangers, They were fragments of countless souls who had found refuge here, who had woven their stories into the house's memory. She traced her fingers along the edge of the phonograph, sensing the weight of those stories pressing gently against her skin. The stained glass windows glowed faintly, the colors shifting to depict scenes from the voices she'd just heard: a garden in bloom, a cozy firelit room, laughter shared among friends. In the center of the room stood a lectern, holding a large, leather-bound book. Its pages were blank, save for the shimmering inscription on the cover, "The Chronicle of Souls." Illyra approached, opening the tome with reverence. She found a pen resting beside it, ink well filled and waiting. With a steady breath, she dipped the pen and began to write her own story: the journey that had brought her here, the mysteries she had uncovered, the feelings stirring within her. The room seemed to pulse in response, the voices rising once again in a gentle chorus, welcoming her into the lineage of dreamers who had found this sanctuary. Illyra understood now, this house was more than walls and wood. It was a living archive, a keeper of stories, memories, and souls. And now, her voice would be added to the symphony. The soft murmur of voices still lingered faintly in Illyra's ears as she stepped out of the room of echoed voices. The house seemed quieter now, as if it had paused, holding its breath for what was to come. Her fingers brushed against the worn leather cover of the Chronicle of Souls still tucked under her arm, a tangible reminder that she was no longer a mere visitor, but a participant in the house's living memory. Her footsteps led her down a narrow staircase hidden behind a tapestry she hadn't noticed before. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of aged paper and cedar. At the bottom of the stairs was a door, small and almost invisible, carved from dark mahogany with intricate filigree swirling like ivy around a single keyhole. The map had named this place the Secret Study. Illyra's heart quickened. She reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a moment. The house, in its quiet way, seemed to pulse, waiting for her to make the choice. With a steady breath, she turned the knob and pushed open the door. Inside, the study unfolded like a treasure trove of hidden knowledge. Walls lined with shelves stretched high, crammed with countless books bound in leather, vellum, and cloth. Scrolls were stacked carefully on tables, some tied with faded ribbons, others sealed with wax. In the center of the room stood a large desk, cluttered with quills, ink pots, and sheets of parchment filled with neat, looping handwriting. A single candle burned low, casting dancing shadows across the room, and in one corner, an ancient globe slowly rotated, its surface covered with unfamiliar constellations. Illyra stepped forward and ran her fingers along the spines of books, feeling the weight of centuries of wisdom. Titles were written in languages she recognized and others she didn't, ancient dialects, forgotten scripts, and symbols that hinted at secrets beyond ordinary understanding. On the desk lay an open book, its pages glowing faintly as if touched by a soft inner light. Curious, Illyra approached and peered down. The text shifted and changed, forming words as if responding to her presence. Knowledge is the light that guides the soul through shadows. But some truths are not given freely, they must be earned. Beneath the inscription was a riddle. To open the door to what lies beyond, find the key in the story you carry within. Illyra pondered the riddle, her thoughts drifting to the journal she had written in the Chronicle of Souls. Was her own story the key? She closed the glowing book and turned her gaze to the desk's scattered papers. One sheet caught her eye, a letter, old and yellowed, addressed to the keeper of stories. She unfolded it carefully. Dear Keeper, if you have found this study, know that you hold a responsibility greater than mere discovery. This house preserves not only memories, but the essence of those who seek refuge here. To unlock its deepest secrets, you must first understand what you carry in your heart, your fears, your hopes, your dreams. Asterisk. A soft breeze stirred the papers, and Illyra felt a sudden clarity wash over her. The house was not a puzzle to solve, but a mirror to her own soul. She sat at the desk and opened the Chronicle of Souls, her pen poised above the parchment. As she began to write, the room seemed to breathe with her. The candlelight flickered brighter, the globe slowed its spin, and a warmth spread through the study, wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. Here, in the secret study, Illyra felt the convergence of all paths, the past and present, the seen and unseen. It was a place of beginnings and revelations. She wrote long into the night, each word unlocking a door within herself, each sentence weaving her more deeply into the house's timeless story. Illyra awoke the next morning to a pale light filtering softly through the tall windows of the secret study. The scent of cedarwood and parchment lingered in the air, wrapping around her like a whispered promise. The house seemed still, yet beneath its quiet exterior, an undercurrent of energy pulsed, inviting her onward. She unfolded the map once again, tracing her fingers to a new location marked, the secret garden. It was a place she had glimpsed from the sitting room window, a hidden courtyard cloaked in shadows and dappled light, separated from the world by high stone walls entwined with ivy. Drawn by curiosity and a deepening sense of belonging, Illyra made her way through the winding halls toward the garden's entrance. The door, covered in creeping vines, stood slightly ajar, as if awaiting her arrival. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The garden was a sanctuary untouched by time, where wildflowers bloomed in riotous colors and ancient trees stretched their limbs toward the sky. The air was alive with the hum of bees and the flutter of butterfly wings. Stone paths wound through the lush greenery, leading to alcoves filled with forgotten statues and benches carved with delicate patterns. At the garden's heart lay a small, tranquil pond. Its surface was smooth as glass, reflecting the sky and the surrounding trees in perfect clarity. Illyra approached the water's edge and knelt down, peering into the depths. As she did, the surface shimmered, and images began to emerge, faint, ghostly scenes flickering like memories. She saw a young woman tending the roses, her hands gentle and sure. A man reading by the pond's edge, lost in thought. Children chasing fireflies beneath the stars. These were the stories of those who had walked this garden before her, their hopes, dreams, and sorrows etched into the very soil and water. From a stone bench nearby, Illyra picked up a weather journal, its cover embossed with a faded emblem of a tree intertwined with a book. Opening it, she found pages filled with handwritten tales, poems, letters, and reflections written by the house's previous inhabitants. One passage caught her eye. In this garden, the past is not forgotten, but blossoming. Each story a seed, waiting to take root in new hearts. Illyra felt a stirring within her, a call to nurture these stories, to weave her own into the garden's rich tapestry. She settled onto the bench, pen and notebook in hand, and began to write. Her words flowed freely, mingling with the whispers of the garden, becoming part of its living memory. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the secret garden, Illyra understood that this place was more than a refuge, it was a wellspring of renewal. And in tending to these untold stories, she was tending to herself. Illyra left the secret garden with a sense of quiet fulfillment. The sun was dipping low now, casting long golden rays through the stained glass windows as she made her way back through the winding corridors of the house. The scents of earth and flowers still clung lightly to her clothes, mingling with the faint aroma of aged wood and parchment. Her steps led her to a familiar doorway, one she had passed many times but never fully entered before. Above it, in ornate script, was written the Hearth of Memories. She paused, taking a deep breath, then crossed the threshold. The room was warm, not just from the crackling fire that roared in the stone hearth but from the very atmosphere itself. It was as though the walls exhaled a long-held breath, welcoming her back like a beloved family member. Soft light danced across the walls, illuminating framed photographs and heirlooms that told stories without words. A wooden rocking chair sat in one corner, its cushions worn but inviting. The scent of cinnamon and baking bread lingered faintly in the air, teasing memories just beyond reach. Illyra moved to the hearth and settled down on a plush rug. She watched the flames flicker and twist, their golden tongues weaving stories of warmth and comfort. The fire's glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, sinking her to the house's steady breath. As she closed her eyes, images began to flow through her mind. A mother humming a lullaby while rocking her child. Laughter around a dinner table. The soft murmur of shared secrets whispered in twilight. These weren't just memories of strangers, they felt personal, as though the house itself was showing her fragments of a life she had always yearned for but never known. Opening her journal, Illyra began to write. Words poured from her, chronicling the emotions the hearth stirred within her soul, the longing, the love, the sense of belonging. Outside, the wind rose gently, rustling the leaves of the ancient oaks. Inside, the fire crackled on, its warmth wrapping around her like a protective embrace. Illyra realized then that this room was the heart of the house, not just a place to warm the body but a sanctuary for the soul. And in this hearth, she would find the strength to forge her own story, to become part of the family the house had patiently gathered through time. Illyra stepped softly from the hearth of memories, her heart still warmed by the lingering glow of the fire. The house seemed to hum with quiet anticipation, as if it knew she was ready for what lay ahead. Clutching her journal close, she moved down a dimly lit corridor she had not yet explored, guided only by the soft light of her lavender lantern. At the end of the hall, an ornate archway beckoned. Above it, in delicate script, were the words, "The Gallery of Treasured Moments." As she crossed the threshold, Illyra was enveloped by a room unlike any she had seen. The walls were lined with frames of every size and shape, some gilded with gold, others weathered and simple, each holding photographs, paintings, and keepsakes that seemed to capture the essence of Lives once lived within these walls. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting a gentle glow over the collection. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the scent of memory made tangible. Illyra moved slowly along the gallery, pausing at each piece to study the stories frozen in time. There was a black and white photograph of a young couple standing beneath the ancient oak, smiles radiant, eyes full of promise. A delicate locket lay beneath a glass case, its clasp worn from years of touch. A painting depicted a child chasing butterflies in the secret garden, their laughter almost audible. Each item radiated a presence, as though the people behind them still lingered just beyond the veil. In the center of the gallery stood a pedestal bearing a single, large book bound in deep crimson leather, the Book of Lives. Illyra approached and opened it reverently. The pages were filled with handwritten stories, sketches, and letters, chronicles of joy, sorrow, courage, and love. As she turned the pages, the words seemed to shimmer, breathing life into the past. One entry caught her eye, written in a familiar hand. To those who find this place, know that you are never truly alone. Our moments live on, carried by those who remember. And in remembering, we are made whole. Illyra closed the book gently, her eyes shining with tears. She understood now that the house was not just a shelter, but a living tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives. She stepped back, feeling the weight and beauty of the legacy she had inherited. In that moment, Illyra felt a quiet resolve settle within her. She would honor these moments. She would add her story to the gallery. And she would cherish the home that had found her when she was ready. Illyra stepped out of the gallery of treasured moments, her heart heavy yet uplifted by the stories she had just absorbed. The house around her seemed to glow faintly, as if basking in the light of those memories. The lavender glow of her lantern mingled with the soft warmth seeping from the walls, guiding her toward the next chapter. Ahead lay a doorway framed with delicate carvings of sunrises and blooming flowers. Above it, an inscription read, "The Chamber of Morning Light." She pushed open the door and was immediately enveloped in brilliance. The room was vast and circular, its domed ceiling painted with hues of pink, gold, and amber, the very colors of dawn captured in brush strokes. Tall windows stretched from floor to ceiling, allowing streams of warm sunlight to pour in, casting dancing patterns on the polished wooden floor. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror that reflected not only Illyra's image but the vibrant light filling the room. The air was filled with the faint scent of fresh rain and wildflowers, a scent that seemed to awaken every corner of her soul. Illyra stepped forward, feeling the gentle embrace of morning light wash over her like a balm. The room pulsed with promise, a silent invitation to leave behind shadows and step into new beginnings. As she gazed into the mirror, visions flickered, dreams she had buried, hopes she had forgotten, moments of courage yet to be taken. The mirror showed not just her reflection but a tapestry of possibilities. A soft voice echoed in her mind, "With every dawn, the past fades, and the future is born anew. Embrace the light, for it carries your truth." Illyra closed her eyes and let the light fill her, feeling warmth spread from her chest outward, igniting a quiet fire within. When she opened her eyes again, she felt renewed, ready to face whatever lay ahead, to weave her story with the strength and grace of the morning sun. The chamber of morning light was not just a room, it was a threshold, a promise that no matter the darkness, a new day always awaits. With a final glance around the radiant space, Illyra stepped toward the door, her heart light and full. The warmth of the chamber of morning light still clung to Illyra's skin as she stepped through the doorway leading away from its radiant glow. Ahead stretched a narrow corridor, its walls draped with heavy velvet curtains that muffled all sound save for a faint, persistent murmur. This was the corridor of whispers, a passageway where secrets lingered and untold stories found their voice. Illyra moved cautiously forward, each footstep softened by the thick carpet underfoot. The whispers swirled around her like a gentle breeze, voices threading in and out of comprehension, fragments of conversations, sighs, laughter, and hushed confessions. They seemed to come from the very fabric of the walls, echoing the memories embedded in the house itself. Fingers grazing the velvet, Illyra felt the weight of countless untold truths pressing close. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and lavender, and shadows danced at the edges of her vision. As she proceeded, the murmurs coalesced into a voice both distant and intimate, a woman's voice, soft and steady, reciting a poem. In silence, stories softly creep through walls that wake and secrets keep, each whisper born on breath's embrace. A fleeting touch, a vanished face. Illyra's breath caught. The voice was familiar, yet she could not place its source. The whispers crescendoed into a chorus, the overlapping voices weaving a tapestry of lives intertwined: loss, hope, love, and longing. Along the corridor, small alcoves appeared, each containing relics, a cracked teacup, a faded letter, a child's worn shoe. Each artifact seemed to pulse with silent stories waiting to be heard. Illyra paused before one alcove where a delicate music box sat. As she lifted the lid, a haunting melody spilled forth, mingling with the whispers. The tune stirred memories she hadn't known she carried of childhood days, forgotten dreams, and promises unkept. Moved beyond words, she closed the music box and pressed onward. At the corridor's end, a door marked the chamber of reflection awaited. The whispers softened, as though granting passage. Before entering, Illyra glanced back down the corridor, feeling the weight of voices and stories now part of her own. She stepped through the door, ready to face the truths reflected within. As Illyra stepped through the luminous portal from the chamber of reflection, she felt a delicate shift in the air, a gentle vibration, like the faint hum of a distant melody just out of reach. The path ahead opened into a dim corridor lined with old wooden panels carved with intricate musical notes and swirling patterns, almost alive in their grace. At the end of this corridor, she found an unassuming door, its surface painted a deep, midnight blue, speckled with tiny silver dots that glimmered like stars. Above the door hung a small plaque bearing the words "The Room of Forgotten Songs." With a breath that trembled between anticipation and reverence, Illyra pushed open the door. The room was cloaked in twilight, bathed in the soft glow of candles nestled in sconces along the walls. The scent of aged parchment mixed with the faint aroma of sandalwood and vanilla, invoking an atmosphere both nostalgic and sacred. Before her stretched a grand space filled with an array of ancient instruments: violins with cracked varnish, harps with strings shimmering faintly, a grand piano whose keys reflected the flickering candlelight, and lutes and flutes resting carefully on velvet cushions. The center of the room was dominated by a circular dais carved from ivory-hued marble. Upon it rested a large, leather-bound tome embossed with gold filigree and a symbol resembling intertwined musical notes and vines. Illyra approached and opened the tome. Its pages were filled with musical notations, lyrics in languages both familiar and arcane, and delicate sketches of hands playing instruments with passion and grace. But as she turned the pages, the silence was broken not by sound, but by a feeling. A subtle vibration hummed through the floor, rising slowly like a wave. The room itself seemed to awaken. Soft notes filled the air, first a solitary violin, then a gentle harp, followed by a chorus of whispered harmonies that danced between the shadows. The music was ethereal, weaving through the room like a tapestry of emotion and memory, each note carrying fragments of stories left behind by those who had once walked these halls. Illyra closed her eyes, letting the melodies wash over her, stirring feelings buried deep within her soul. She could almost hear voices, laughter, sighs, whispered secrets, all entwined in the forgotten songs. Opening her eyes, she noticed that the instruments began to glow faintly, their light pulsing in time with the music. One violin, resting on a stand nearby, shimmered with an inviting glow. Drawn to it, Illyra lifted the instrument gently. The strings vibrated as if sensing her touch, and she felt an inexplicable connection, as though the violin held the voice of the house itself. Tentatively, she drew the bow across the strings. A single, pure note rang out, resonating through the room and awakening echoes of melodies long silenced. As she played, the music transformed, notes rising and falling in a dance that told tales of joy and sorrow, loss and hope. The room seemed to breathe in harmony with her, the forgotten songs returning to life through her hands. With each stroke, Illyra felt her own story weaving into the symphony, a new thread in the intricate tapestry of the house's history. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the instruments gently dimmed, and the room returned to its hushed state. Illyra set down the violin, her heart pounding with exhilaration and a profound sense of belonging. She opened the musical tome once more, discovering a handwritten note tucked between the pages. Music is the language of memory and emotion. The echo of souls intertwined across time. Through song, we remember. And through remembering, we live. Tears pricked at her eyes as she realized that this room was more than a sanctuary for music. It was a sacred space where the very essence of life's melodies was preserved and shared. The room of forgotten songs had welcomed her into its chorus, and she knew her journey was far from over. After leaving the haunting melodies of the room of forgotten songs behind, Illyra wandered through the quiet halls of the house, feeling the lingering warmth of music settle gently into her bones. The house had woven her deeper into its fabric, yet she sensed that the most mysterious revelations still awaited her. The ancient map, now folded carefully in her satchel, beckoned her toward a place marked simply as the Garden of Eternal Twilight. The name itself was a paradox. How could twilight ever be eternal? Yet in this house, paradoxes lived and breathed as surely as the trees outside. Illyra followed winding corridors and spiraling staircases until she reached a heavy door, its surface worn but etched with intricate patterns of crescent moons and stars intertwined with blooming, Nightshade flowers. The air near the door was cooler, scented faintly of damp earth and jasmine. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. What greeted her was unlike any garden she had ever seen. The garden of eternal twilight stretched out beneath a vast, domed glass ceiling that filtered the fading light of day into a muted cascade of purples, blues, and deep golds, the colors of a perpetual dusk. This ethereal glow bathed the lush plants, casting long, soft shadows that shifted and swayed like living things. Trees with silver bark towered over winding paths paved in smooth obsidian stones that shimmered like stars underfoot. Flowers bloomed in impossible hues, deep indigos, fiery crimsons, and pale luminescent whites that seemed to pulse with a quiet inner light. Butterflies with wings like stained glass fluttered past, their flight slow and mesmerizing. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and wild honeysuckle, mingling with a faint whisper of something ancient, magic, perhaps, or memories too old to name. Illyra stepped carefully along the winding path, her footsteps muffled by a soft carpet of moss and fallen petals. Somewhere in the distance, the gentle ripple of water called to her, mingling with the faint murmur of voices she could almost but not quite make out. As she moved deeper into the garden, the boundary between light and shadow seemed to blur, creating spaces where both danced together in a delicate balance. Illyra felt as if she were walking not just through a garden, but through the thin veil between reality and dream. Ahead, a circle of stone benches surrounded a tranquil pond, its surface perfectly still and reflecting the twilight sky above like a polished mirror. Illyra approached and knelt beside the water. Peering into the depths, she saw not just her reflection, but shifting images, visions of moments long past and futures yet to come. Faces appeared and faded, a child's laughter beneath a summer sun, an elder's quiet smile by a hearth, a lover's embrace in a rain-kissed garden. The pond was a pool of memories, a living chronicle of the souls who had found sanctuary here. Illyra reached out, her fingers grazing the water's surface. Ripples spread, distorting the images, and suddenly the garden around her seemed to lean in, the shadows thickening and swirling into shapes. From the gathering dusk emerged a figure, a woman draped in flowing robes that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her eyes were deep pools of ancient wisdom, and her voice was the soft rustle of leaves in the night. "Welcome, Illyra," she said, her tone both gentle and commanding. "You stand in the garden of eternal twilight, the heart where light and shadow entwine, where beginnings and endings merge." Illyra rose slowly, captivated. "This garden holds the secrets of balance," the woman continued. "The house is alive because it embraces the twilight, the space between day and night, hope and despair, memory and forgetting. To walk this garden is to accept all parts of yourself, to honor the darkness as much as the light." Illyra's heart swelled with emotion. The journey through the house had brought her to many places, rooms of light and shadow, of sound and silence, but none had spoken so profoundly to the depths of her being. The woman smiled, extending a hand. "Will you walk with me?" Taking the woman's hand, Illyra felt a surge of warmth and clarity. Together, they strolled along the paths, the twilight hues shifting gently with each step. They came upon a flowering tree unlike any other, its blossoms shimmering silver in the dim light. Hanging from its branches were delicate glass lanterns, each containing a tiny flickering flame. "These are the lanterns of remembered souls," the woman explained. "Each flame is a story, a life cherished and never lost. When a soul finds peace, their flame joins the garden, lighting the eternal twilight." Illyra reached out to touch one lantern. It pulsed softly under her fingers, as if recognizing her touch. Suddenly, memories flooded her, the fears she had buried, the dreams she had deferred, the moments of joy and pain that had shaped her journey. Tears streamed down her face, releasing years of silent longing. The woman watched silently, then spoke again. "The house has chosen you not just to remember, but to heal and to carry forward. The twilight is not a place of endings, but of transformation." Illyra nodded, feeling a newfound strength settle within. They walked on until the garden opened onto a clearing where a small stone altar stood, carved with symbols of sun and moon intertwined. "Here," the woman said, "is where you decide what to leave behind and what to carry forward. What will you offer to the garden?" Illyra closed her eyes, reflecting on her journey. She thought of the songs, the stories, the memories intertwined within the house's walls. She thought of the hope she had lost and found again. Slowly, she reached into her satchel and withdrew the journal, the Chronicle of Souls. Opening it to a blank page, she began to write, her words flowing like the gentle twilight around her. When she finished, she placed the journal reverently on the altar. The lanterns flared softly, bathing the garden in a warm, radiant glow. Illyra smiled through her tears, feeling the eternal twilight wrap around her like a protective cloak. In that moment, she understood her story was now part of the house's timeless embrace, a light in the delicate dance of shadow and sun. The soft glow of the garden of eternal twilight faded behind Illyra as she stepped through the archway that led to a new part of the house. The air grew cooler, the light dimmer. Ahead lay a heavy iron door, ornate and imposing, etched with twisting vines and shadowy figures intertwined in an eternal dance. Above it, carved in ancient script, were the words, "The Trial of Shadows." Illyra's heart quickened. The house had welcomed her, guided her, shared its deepest secrets, but this felt different. The trial was a reckoning, a challenge to confront what lay hidden beneath the surface. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. The cold metal sent a shiver up her arm. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Inside, darkness greeted her, a vast chamber seemingly without end. The floor beneath her feet was smooth stone, reflecting faint glimmers of light from unseen sources. The walls vanished into shadows that seemed to move and pulse, alive with whispered voices and flickers of ghostly shapes. As her eyes adjusted, Illyra saw figures emerging from the darkness, phantoms made of shadow and light, their forms shifting, sometimes human, sometimes something else. They circled her slowly, their presence heavy and charged with emotion. One stepped forward, a tall figure cloaked in shadow, face obscured but eyes glowing with quiet intensity. "You have journeyed far, Illyra," the voice echoed, deep and resonant. "But before you may claim your place within this house, you must face what you have tried to hide, the shadows you carry within." Illyra swallowed hard, memories flooding back, doubts, fears, regrets she had buried deep. The loneliness that had driven her wandering years. The wounds of loss and longing. The shadow figure extended a hand, and images flooded the chamber. She saw herself as a child, left alone in an empty room. She saw herself walking away from loved ones, closing doors rather than opening them. She saw the moments when fear had silenced her voice, when she had chosen comfort over courage. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not turn away. "I am not afraid," she whispered. The shadows shifted, twisting into darker shapes, manifestations of guilt, pain, and sorrow. They moved toward her, threatening to overwhelm. But Illyra stood firm, reaching deep inside to find a light. A spark ignited in the chamber of morning light, nurtured in the garden of eternal twilight. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly, grounding herself. From her satchel, she pulled the Chronicle of Souls and held it tight. "This is my story," she said, voice steady. "Every joy, every sorrow. I will not deny the shadows, for they are part of me. But I choose to live in the light." The chamber brightened, shadows recoiling like mist before the dawn. The phantoms' faces softened, their forms becoming clear, no longer threatening, but serene. The tall figure stepped closer, lowering its hood to reveal a woman's face, timeless and radiant, eyes filled with compassion. "You have passed the trial, Illyra. The house recognizes your courage, your truth." A warm light enveloped Illyra, lifting her spirits, healing old wounds. She felt the weight of years fall away, replaced by a profound peace. The chamber transformed the darkness, giving way to a garden bathed in soft twilight, the scent of jasmine filling the air. The woman smiled. "Your journey continues, but you are no longer alone. The house is with you, as are all who have walked this path before." Illyra looked around, feeling the presence of countless souls, ancestors, friends, guardians, all woven into the house's embrace. She understood now that this place was not just a sanctuary, but a crucible, a place where the past and present merged, forging strength from vulnerability. Her heart swelled with gratitude and resolve. The trial of shadows had not broken her. It had made her whole. The trial of shadows had left Illyra transformed. The weight she had carried for so long of fear, regret, loneliness had begun to lift, replaced by a quiet strength that radiated from within. She stepped forward through the garden that had blossomed inside the chamber, the twilight hues softening into the gentle embrace of dawn. Her lantern flickered softly, casting a lavender glow that mingled with the first rays of morning light filtering through a canopy of blossoming trees. The scent of jasmine and fresh rain filled the air, a promise of renewal, of hope. Illyra found herself before a wide, ornate doorway framed by flowering vines that sparkled with dew. Above the arch, carved in flowing script, were the words, "The Hall of New Beginnings." Taking a steady breath, she crossed the threshold. Inside, the hall opened into a vast chamber flooded with golden light, as if the sun itself had taken residence here. Tall windows arched to the ceiling, their stained glass casting kaleidoscopic patterns across marble floors and vaulted walls. The air hummed with energy, a symphony of possibility and potential. Illyra's footsteps echoed softly as she walked toward a pedestal at the center of the room. Upon it rested a simple wooden box, its surface polished and warm beneath her touch. She lifted the lid slowly, revealing a collection of seeds, tiny, vibrant, and shimmering faintly with a light of their own. A voice spoke softly, as if from the walls themselves. These seeds represent the future you choose to nurture. Each holds a promise, a dream waiting to grow in the fertile soil of your heart. Illyra picked up a single seed, small and translucent, feeling its warmth pulse gently in her palm. She understood that this was more than a symbol, it was a covenant between her and the house. With reverence, she planted the seed in a small pot of rich earth set beside the pedestal. Instantly, a sprout burst forth, growing rapidly into a delicate vine that climbed toward the golden light above. The hall filled with the sound of gentle laughter and voices singing songs of hope and renewal. Illyra felt tears spill down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of joy and gratitude. This was her home now, a place where past and future intertwined, where every story mattered, where she was no longer alone. She walked to the hall's far end, where a mirror framed in gold stood tall. Gazing into it, she saw not just her reflection, but a vision of herself surrounded by light and love, standing firmly rooted in the place she had sought for so long. The house, in all its mystery and magic, had given her more than shelter. It had given her a chance to become whole. Illyra whispered a vow to herself and to the house. I will carry this light forward. I will nurture every seed of hope. And I will honor the stories that brought me here. Outside, the sun rose higher, bathing the world in warmth. Inside, the Hall of New Beginnings shimmered with life, a beacon for all who sought refuge, healing, and belonging. And Illyra knew her journey was just beginning. Emerging from the glowing embrace of the Hall of New Beginnings, Illyra found herself standing before a heavy oak door carved with ancient symbols of protection and unity. Above, an inscription read, "The Keeper's Sanctuary." The air around the entrance hummed with a palpable sense of purpose and peace. With steady hands, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The sanctuary was a vast, vaulted chamber bathed in warm light pouring from stained glass windows that depicted scenes of gathering, healing, and shared stories. Long wooden tables lined the room, carved with intricate patterns of intertwined vines and stars, and soft cushions invited visitors to sit and connect. Around the tables sat figures, their faces familiar and new, others who, like Illyra, had been drawn to the house, seekers and dreamers carrying their own stories of loss, hope, and transformation. One woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair rose to greet Illyra. "Welcome, Keeper," she said gently. "This is where we gather, where stories meet and hearts heal. Here, you are never alone." Illyra felt the warmth of belonging settle deep inside. She joined the circle, sharing her journey and listening to others who recounted their own trials and triumphs within the house. Together, they wove a tapestry of shared experience, each thread strengthening the sanctuary's light. As night fell outside, the sanctuary glowed brighter, a beacon of connection and renewal. Illyra knew she had found not just a home, but a family. Illyra's time in the Keeper's sanctuary had filled her heart with warmth and renewed purpose. Surrounded by others who had been drawn to the house's mysteries, she felt the strength of shared stories and collective healing. Yet deep within, a quiet whisper beckoned her onward, toward a place shrouded in deeper shadows and older truths. Following a narrow spiral staircase hidden behind a tapestry of celestial constellations, Illyra descended into the bowels of the house. The air grew cool, tinged with the scent of aged stone and distant echoes. At the bottom, a heavy iron door barred the way, its surface engraved with swirling symbols of time clocks melting into stars, hourglasses spilling sand into infinity. Carved above the door, in a script older than memory, were the words "The Vault of Timeless Secrets." Her fingers trembled as she grasped the cold iron handle. With a steadying breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The vault was vast and cavernous, walls lined with shelves that stretched into darkness, filled with ancient tomes, scrolls, and artifacts pulsing with hidden energy. Soft blue light emanated from crystalline orbs embedded in the ceiling, casting a cool glow over the endless rows of knowledge. Illyra moved carefully, the floor beneath her echoing softly as if breathing with the house itself. The atmosphere was thick with power knowledge accumulated across centuries, whispers of secrets both wondrous and terrible. In the center of the vault lay a stone pedestal, upon which rested a single, ornately carved chest. Its surface shimmered with intricate patterns of celestial bodies and cryptic runes that seemed to shift and rearrange as she gazed. Approaching the chest, Illyra felt a wave of anticipation mingled with caution. This was the heart of the house's mysteries, the place where its deepest truths were kept, protected from those unready to face them. Her hand hovered above the chest's latch, then slowly, deliberately, she lifted it. Inside lay a collection of scrolls tied with crimson ribbons, a delicate crystal vial filled with shimmering liquid, and a small leather-bound journal embossed with the symbol of a spiral entwined with a serpent. Illyra picked up the journal first, opening it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, the words alive with the voice of a keeper long past. To the seeker who finds this. The house holds many secrets of time, memory, and soul. Some truths illuminate, others challenge, but all are threads in the tapestry of being. To understand the house is to understand oneself and to accept that which lies hidden beneath the surface. Illyra's eyes lifted to the vial, its contents glowing faintly. She uncorked it carefully, inhaling the scent, a mix of night jasmine, aged parchment, and something indescribable, like the essence of forgotten dreams. A sudden vision overwhelmed her, fleeting images of ancient keepers, ceremonies beneath starlit skies, rituals of binding and release. She saw the house as a living entity, a guardian of souls and stories, thriving on the balance between light and shadow. Each artifact, each scroll was a fragment of this living history, waiting to be understood, honored, and carried forward. Turning back to the scrolls, Illyra selected one and unfurled it gently. The script danced across the parchment, telling of trials faced by those before her, of sacrifices made and wisdom earned. It spoke of the delicate dance between preserving memory and embracing change. Hours passed as she read and absorbed, the vault becoming a sanctuary of revelation. She realized that the house was not just a home, it was a living archive, a place where past and future converged through those willing to bear its truths. As dawn approached, Illyra closed the journal and gathered the scrolls, vial, and chest carefully. She felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders, a mantle passed down through generations. The vault of timeless secrets had opened its heart to her, revealing not only the mysteries of the house but the deeper mysteries within herself. She knew now that her journey was not just about finding a home but about becoming a keeper, a guardian of stories, memories, and hope. Emerging from the vault, the first light of day greeted her, promising new paths and endless possibilities. As the first golden rays of dawn spilled over the horizon, Illyra stood on the threshold of the house's grandest chamber, a vast hall adorned with soaring arches, stained glass windows, and a floor patterned with an intricate mosaic of intertwining vines and stars. This was the light that binds us, the heart of the home, where all stories converged and found their eternal place. Every step she took echoed softly as the house seemed to awaken fully, breathing with a newfound vitality. Illyra carried within her the weight of every trial, every whispered secret, every song and memory she had embraced along her journey. The house had become a part of her, and she, a part of its timeless soul. At the center of the hall stood a radiant orb, pulsating with warm, living light. It shimmered and shifted, reflecting the myriad hues of every story told, every shadow faced, and every hope kindled within these walls. Illyra approached, feeling the light's gentle pull on her spirit. Kneeling before the orb, she placed her hands upon its surface. Visions flooded her mind, faces of those who had come before, their stories woven into the very fabric of the house. She saw herself reflected back, not as she was, but as she could be, whole, brave, and bound to a community of keepers who guarded the light together. A voice, both ancient and tender, whispered through the hall. "You are home, Illyra. Within these walls, your story will live forever. The light that binds us is not just here, it is within you. And through you, it will shine on." Tears of gratitude streamed down Illyra's cheeks. She rose, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose. The house was no longer a mystery to solve but a living legacy to nurture. She knew that her journey had just begun, not alone, but with the voices, memories, and light of all who had found sanctuary here. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, a tapestry of life that would endure beyond time. With one last look around the glowing chamber, Illyra stepped forward into her new life as keeper of the house, a guardian of stories and light. And in the quiet that followed, the house sighed with contentment, its doors open wide, its heart forever beating in harmony with hers. Chapter 1: The Path Beyond the Whispering Oaks. Description: Illyra Whitmore begins her journey searching for a true home along a quiet forest path, drawn by a mysterious invitation from a hidden house nestled deep within the Whispering Oaks. Chapter 2: The Map of Memories. Description: Inside the house, Illyra discovers a mysterious map detailing the home's unusual rooms and secret places, opening the door to deep memories waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 3: The Garden of Longing. Description: Lost in a wild, fragrant garden filled with ancient trees and blooming flowers, Illyra uncovers sweet and bittersweet stories embedded in every corner of this enchanted place. Chapter 4: The Lantern Hall. Description: In a corridor lit by countless lanterns, Illyra lights her own lamp, connecting with the hopes and dreams of those who came before her, stepping into a flow of light and possibility. Chapter 5, The Hearth of Memory. Description: the glowing hearth warms more than Illyra's body, it soothes her soul, inviting her to confront her past and find peace within its flickering flames. Chapter 6, The Room of Echoed Voices. Description: in a room filled with whispered voices of the past, Illyra listens to the stories carried through time, feeling a profound connection to those who walked the halls before her. Chapter 7, The Secret Study. Description: Illyra explores a hidden library filled with ancient books and secrets passed through generations, beginning to grasp the true meaning of the house and her role within it. Chapter 8, The Secret Garden of Untold Stories. Description: in a secluded garden bursting with vibrant blooms, Illyra discovers untold tales preserved in old journals, merging with the flow of time and memory. Chapter 9, The Hearth of Memories. Description: a cozy room filled with the scent of home and the sounds of family, where Illyra faces sweet memories and learns to love herself more deeply. Chapter 10, The Gallery of Treasured Moments. Description: Illyra steps into a gallery showcasing precious moments, keepsakes, and stories of those who once lived here, recognizing the value in every life's narrative. Chapter 11, The Chamber of Morning Light. Description: bathed in the vibrant light of dawn, Illyra gains inspiration and strength to embrace new beginnings and awaken forgotten dreams. Chapter 12, The Corridor of Whispers. Description: along a hallway filled with secrets and whispered pasts, Illyra uncovers hidden memories and confronts forgotten fragments of her own story. Chapter 13, The Chamber of Reflection. Description: in a room of endless mirrors, Illyra faces her true self, her fears, hopes, and deepest truths, learning to embrace and heal her soul. Chapter 14, The Room of Forgotten Songs. Description: surrounded by ancient instruments and ethereal melodies, Illyra connects with the soul of the house through forgotten songs, weaving her own voice into its timeless symphony. Chapter 15, The Garden of Eternal Twilight. Description: in a mystical garden where light and shadow dance in perpetual twilight, Illyra learns the balance of life and accepts the unity of darkness and light within herself. Chapter 16, The Trial of Shadows. Description: facing her darkest fears and buried pains, Illyra undergoes a transformative trial, emerging stronger and ready to embrace her true power. Chapter 17, The Dawn of New Beginnings. Description: under the promise of a new dawn, Illyra plants seeds of hope and renewal, stepping into her role as guardian of stories and light. Chapter 18, The Keeper's Sanctuary. Description: Illyra finds community and strength among fellow keepers, sharing stories and nurturing a collective light that heals and empowers. Chapter 19, The Vault of Timeless Secrets. Description: descending into the house's deepest chamber, Illyra uncovers ancient secrets and timeless wisdom that reveal her true purpose as a keeper. Chapter 20, The Light That Binds Us. Description: in the final chapter, Illyra fully embraces her role as guardian of the house's legacy, merging her story with the eternal light that connects all who call this place home.